Welcome to Happy Writing, your podcast home for taking positive steps forward with your author business. I'm your host and happy writer-in-chief, Dion Abulela. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by Dorianne Dupre, author of the award-winning novel Scout's Honor. Scout's Honor shows you how far one person will go to save their honor and who really has a hold of it in the first place. You can find Scout's Honor at your favorite booksellers such as Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, and more. Hello, happy writers, and welcome to today's podcast. We are joined by an amazing author today, Brian Rouff. Brian is the author of books such as Dice Angel, Money Shot, Restless City, and The House Always Wins. As you may have guessed, these novels all center around Las Vegas. Today, we will chat with Brian about finding a niche and how this has helped his career. So, Brian, I just realized I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name. So
it's rough, but I will answer to anything. It's a little challenging, so we're all good.
Okay, so I thought it looked like rough, but then I'm like, well, I don't want to be barking like a dog if it's not. But
all right, feel free, bark away.
Okay. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our podcast listeners and tell us a little bit about your writing.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I am a Vegas-based novelist, and I've lived here for more than 35 years, which is insane when I stop to think about it, because one day at a time, right? Vegas is the type of town where you go, yeah, I'll move there for a couple of years, and then I'll move back to LA or wherever you're from. But it kind of seduces you. It sucks you in. Even the people that move away tend to move back. And as a writer and with a journalistic background, the town is fascinating. You know, every town has its own personality, but there's certain cities that really all you have to do is pay attention to what's going on as far as the types of characters and the conversations you'll overhear in a public place. And I just write them all down and I throw them in a file. And eventually I get an idea. Maybe it's an idea from a friend or something, a personal experience. Perhaps it's something I read in the paper and it starts to torment me. And then that's the seed for another novel. So my goal is to be connected so closely with Las Vegas that I want to be branded as a Las Vegas writer. And having 4 works under my belt, I feel like I'm getting there. I have, as one of my characters says in my latest book, The House Always Wins, I have a small but loyal following. So that's a great start.
You know, small but loyal is sometimes more valuable than large and unloyal. So I love that you just said that.
Well, thank you.
You are welcome. How do you think that small but loyal following impacts your career as an author?
Well, it's all based on relationships. And so when, I can't say that I know every one of my readers by name because there are thousands of them. When I say small, it's a relative term, of course. These bestsellers, worldwide bestsellers, can sell millions and millions of copies. I'm not even close. I'm not even obsessed with that. But in terms of building relationships with your readers, for example, I always put my email address at the end of my books. I love to hear from people. If I get a nice review somewhere on Amazon or Goodreads, and by the way, for us authors who are considered mid-list, meaning a degree of success but not the highest echelon, these reviews are super, super important. But if somebody uses their name on a review, I will try to get a hold of them to thank them personally. So I really think it's about keeping the lines of communication flowing in both directions. And then a lot of what I do in terms of promotion is grassroots. It's very much like politics, except there's never an election. You just keep promoting, and then you still try to find time to write. But I'll do a ton of different like readers groups and libraries, bookstores, symposiums, and panels, what have you. And then you want to stay afterwards and hopefully sell some books, but get in conversations with people and be nice to them, which is not difficult because they're there because they like what you do. So it's very gratifying.
It's really not difficult, but you would be surprised how many people argue with me over that. So
What do you?
they, for some reason, authors are convinced that building a relationship with an audience or just being kind to those who pick up their books, a lot of authors that I work with tell me that's so hard to do. But I'm like, how hard is it to just send them an email if they want to talk to you or on Twitter, you can be so social and so friendly without even having to leave your house. So a little bit of kindness goes a really long way.
Couldn't agree more. And a lot of it is about paying it forward. I love working with newer authors, and I don't give unsolicited advice. But if they want it, I'm happy to do it. In fact, I've kind of veered into some writing consulting, which if I ever get to retire, that seems like a good gig for me. But you know, uh, I think back to when I was starting out, and I'm in my 20th year of writing these novels, and I didn't even start till I was relatively older. I'm glad I waited, but early on, a really well-known, popular, and good writer was nice enough to drop me a line, uh, and it was so encouraging, and it meant so much that I just, thought, if I ever get to this point or even close to it, I want to be that guy. I want to do similar things for people that are up and coming. Makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And something I always tell authors when we talk about this is think of the times where an author has simply done something like your tweet or retweet your tweet, and you've come back and been so excited because here's this author that you admire and they engaged with you. It just took 1 second of their time, but think of how that made you feel, and you have the power to do that for other people.
Exactly. And it's validation. I think all of
Mhm.
us in any creative endeavor, even though we put on a very confident face, I think anytime you put your stuff out there into the public, it's a little scary, no matter how many times you've done it. Even though I say I write primarily for me, and I do, if I can make myself laugh and cry, that makes me happy while I'm writing it. But you also want to make a connection with other human beings. And
Mhm.
when you do that, you just never know. And, you got to develop a thick skin. But I don't think anybody's skin is so thick that they just don't care.
Yeah, I think more people are scared of, like you said, the validation is big. So I think a lot of people are scared of possibly being rejected. But when it comes to connecting with somebody who enjoys your work, I don't think authors should be so scared about that rejection.
Not at all. Not at all. That was one of the advantages of being older when I started is I was already a little bit crusty and not caring quite so much about what other people think. And that's very freeing when it comes right down to it.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier for our readers who did not have advanced access to your biography like I did, but you have a background in media and advertising. Has this helped you build your author platform or how you approach your audience?
Oh, very much. Well, first off, I have a journalistic background, and
Mhm.
that's been extremely helpful just in terms of the type of writing that I do. Because even though I'm writing fiction, it's based on observations and things that I've noticed and heard over the years, and being able to know what those things are and then get to the point quickly in terms of writing is very important. My PR background, because a lot of us journalists go to what we jokingly refer to as the dark side, uh, public relations, has been very helpful in terms of knowing how to craft a media kit, for example, which is what I send to you, and every author should have that, which
Yes.
provides the background information as a resource. But I have a company. We all, again, other than the top 1/10 of 1% of writers, we all need a day job. So I own a marketing and PR firm out here in Las Vegas. Can I put in a plug?
Absolutely.
It's called Imagine Communications. And I work with brilliant young people who know more than I do. So they've built me a nice website and they'll craft my releases because the person who is promoting should not really promote themselves. My job is to get out there and give a talk or, meet people. But in terms of, it's just like an author should never edit their own book. You can take the
Mm.
first pass. but you're going to miss stuff and you're not going to want to cut anything because you're going to love it all.
Mm-hmm.
So, or you're going to hate it all. So, depending on how you're feeling on any given day.
That's
So
my current editing process, I have to say. That's where I'm at.
we'll talk. But it's one of the most collaborative efforts ever. So you need to make sure you've got good editors and you've got good PR people and you've got good web gurus and on and on and on. It's just if you're on your own, it makes it so much more difficult. Look, I mean, I've read statistics that say that every year, especially with self-publishing, that there's 800,000, a million new books that come out every single year.
Mm-hmm.
How do you rise above that? I
Exactly.
think I also read a stat that said that the average author sells about 200 books.
Mm-hmm.
So, I always tell people if you're getting into it for money, and if you've got, I don't try to discourage them, but if money's your number one goal, there's 1,000 easier ways to make money. You really have to get into it for the love of the craft. That's my thought.
And not just get into it for the love of the craft over money, but audiences are so discerning right now that they can tell by the way that you speak to them and even in the way you speak through your writing, whether you truly love writing or if you just think it's a quick fix to a money problem. So
Mm-hmm. That's a great
definitely.
point.
And yeah, and I see it more and more in reviews and pieces that people are saying online where they say, I just don't feel like the author connected with their own story. And to me, that would be the worst feedback, possibly worse than someone saying this is full of grammar errors and you should quit writing.
Yeah,
So,
no doubt about it. And real writers, I've decided, have to write. It's
mhm,
it's not a want; it's a need. And I know that these stories, for me, they torture me until it's like a 3-year-old pulling on and going, Dad, 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 until you have to sit down and write. And then it releases the pressure for a while. And then you go out on promotion tour. And now I'm at the point where I've got another story that's starting to, so the process starts all over again. It's starting to torture me all over again. So, which is good, right? Because
yeah.
listen, if I live to be 1,000, people always say, where do you get your ideas? Ideas are a dime a dozen.
Mhm,
It's not about the idea, it's about the implementation, your motivation, and your ability to stick with it. Because I think all of us want to quit halfway through. It's like running a marathon. Uh,
mhm.
and then we also get suckered into halfway through, you get an idea and you think it's better. That's why I know a lot of writers who have 10 unfinished manuscripts because they keep jumping from one to another to another. You got to finish. That's what makes you real.
Do you have access to my hard drive? So
I do not, but I think I'd enjoy it. Why do you ask?
I tend to be the queen of whips. So,
Mm.
right now I've got 11. But the thing is like I'll move back and forth between them when the inspiration hits, and then I'll get like a real strong push and then finish a book in a weekend or something like that. So I have
Okay.
a very obscure writing process, but
Listen, if it works for you, we all have our own process. And as long as you
exactly.
said the magic word, which is finish.
Yes.
So as long as you're finishing, then whatever. Although I write on computer, my ideas go into a physical file on little scraps of paper.
Mhm.
And I do a lot of traveling for work, and that's downtime. So I'll write on an old fashioned with pen in hand. I'll
Nice.
write on an old fashioned legal pad in an airport, on a plane, in a hotel. About half of my most recent book was written that way.
That's wonderful. I have a question that kind of cycles back to your background, and I wanted to touch on this real quick because you were talking about a media kit, which authors really need to have at least, the very least, a one sheet or a tear sheet that authors can send to media. But what else do you think authors should consider when approaching a media outlet? Or what do you think authors do that turns off media from either interviewing or reviewing their title?
What turns them off is here's my book. My book is great. Write about it. Read it. Love it.
Mhm.
And that'll go right in the slush pile. The authors have to realize that they are a brand. People readers buy authors more than they buy books.
Yes.
We all know somebody that buys everything that a certain author, whoever Grisham, Rowling, King, whoever it might be, they can't wait for the next one to come out. So because those people are really well branded. Um, so what they really need to do is find out, just like a product, what makes them distinctive. That's why I hitched my wagon to Vegas. Nobody else, there were other writers out here. There's really good writers out here, but nobody was actively promoting themselves as a Las Vegas writer, similar to the way some of my other favorite writers, like Carl Hyacin, who writes out of Florida,
Florida.
and the late, great Elmore Leonard out of Detroit. And they were very much associated with their towns. And
Mm-hmm.
I, being a marketing and a PR guy, I decided early on that that was the path I wanted to take, and it served me well. So it's good for all writers to do some self analysis and figure out what makes them different, better, distinctive. Choose your word. But what makes them rise above all the other people out there that are trying to do the same thing?
And I think if authors aren't connecting with some of the authors that you mentioned as well, that they can also think of Nicholas Sparks, because he's known up and down the Outer Banks. And of course, everybody knows The Notebook, love it or hate it, you know it. And you know that
I have a story
he's
about that actually, which I'd be happy to share in about when you take a break.
okay. So you are very, very strongly branded and centered into being a Las Vegas author. I'm really curious if having such a strong niche has ever created a hardship for your author platform, or do you feel like it's been extremely beneficial for you?
It's been beneficial. I mean, I'm sure that it has shut me out of opportunities that might otherwise have been there, but I don't know about them. So I soldier on. It's been great, and it allows me within that. It allows me a great deal of leeway. My first book, Dice Angel, was very gambling oriented, even though it had to do with a guy that lives off of the strip, which we all do. I mean, nobody lives in the hotels except for the high rollers. But so that enabled me to get behind the scenes on Vegas. That's really what I'm trying to do. I want the locals here to kind of shake their or nod knowingly and say, "Yeah, that's the town that I know and love." I want visitors to feel like they've got inside info. I want them to feel like locals. So I'm always dropping little observations here and there about Las Vegas that people would not normally get if they only came here on vacation or spent a week. So it has mostly served me well, and that's why I continue to do it.
Do you think that you find it easier or harder to write about Vegas being a long-term resident?
Definitely easier because, again, every day I'm on the lookout for stuff,
Mhm.
whether it's a kid at a casino. And honestly, those of us who live here hardly ever go in the casinos. It's like people who live across from Disneyland tend to not go to Disneyland every day. But you see a kid in a casino up at the buffet and the self-service ice cream, and he's got his mouth right up there hitting the lever, and it's going right in his mouth, and his parents are not paying any attention at all because they're too busy in the buffet line taking rolls, and she's slipping it into her purse. You see that kind of stuff, not always, but when you see it, you go, wow, I really need to pay attention to that because that's going to work its way into a book someday.
I think we need to have a Vegas retreat where we can just sit in a cafe or a buffet line and watch people.
The airport is a great place. I think that's a wonderful idea. Any casino lobby, hotel lobby is terrific. Downtown, wherever, but anywhere. I always
Mhm.
say that if I'm in a coffee shop, uh, if the guy next to me talking really loud and divulging too much information knew that I was listening, he might be a little more discreet. But
When he
I'm
reads your
glad they
book.
don't. What's that?
When he reads your book or sees a movie one day that's made out of one of your books, then
Yeah,
he'll
the
know.
guy I'm talking about probably doesn't read books, but yeah.
Okay, Brian, how can an author know if they should or should not consider creating a niche for their writing or branding their writing a little bit more tightly?
Well, I think everybody should consider it. Again, and it's not enough to be just a mystery writer. You need to go deeper than that and figure out what it is that makes you a really great mystery writer. Early on in his career, and I know I'm going to butcher his name, pardon me, M. Night Shyamalan.
Close, yeah,
Is
Shyamalan.
that
Well, maybe I'm butchering it. I don't know.
right?
I always thought it was Shyamalan, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't
But
know. So
yeah,
let's just call him my good buddy M. Night.
M
Why don't
Night.
we do that? So, my wife and I were in the movie maybe the first week that The Sixth Sense came out,
Mhm,
and and she's smart and she figures out every mystery ever and ruins it. But everybody in that packed auditorium gasped when the secret was revealed.
mhm,
Everybody. And it's one of those communal moments that you think of and you go, this guy is a genius to be able to do that. Then he kind of lost his way, in his fourth and fifth. I think maybe the Hollywood pressure got to him, but now he's back and
mhm,
he's on that track again. So I just use that as an example of, yeah, there's a ton of people writing mysteries, but what are you going to do to really, keep the audience, stay ahead of the audience and keep them on their toes? Um, and it all circles back to the craft. If you've got the goods in the pages, written, hard copy, digital, whatever it might be, audio, if you've got the goods, it makes it so much easier and better to market because then at some point you're going to get momentum on your side. Word of mouth is going to take over. People are going to start recommending you on their own. And
mhm.
that's a beautiful thing when that starts to happen. Um, it often doesn't. It rarely doesn't happen for writers. But I feel like, don't put something out there that is just me too, me too. The same. Don't copy other people. Don't try to time the market on a trend because, in the
Mhm.
18 months or 24 months it takes your book to get out there, there's going to be a different trend.
Yep.
You can't do it. It'll just look like an also ran. So I think what I'm saying ultimately is with branding and with everything, right from the heart. Be authentic, write the kind of stuff that appeals to you. Hope you find your audience, do everything you can to find your audience. But ultimately, it's going to find it or it's not. But don't be disappointed because there's a piece of work that represents you at a very deep level that is out there in the marketplace. And I know that sounds Pollyanna, but that's the best when that happens. You
And
got one
authors,
email from a reader and you touch that reader
mhm,
mentally and emotionally, you've done a good job.
yes. And the other thing is finding your audience or getting that word of mouth might not happen immediately, but with consistency and with trying new things and putting in a lot of effort, authors really can do it if they understand that it might be a slow burn until that day comes.
Exactly right. It rarely happens immediately. And
Mhm,
if it happens immediately, there's also the chance that it's going to burn out quickly.
mhm.
So with the new book, again, can I put in a plug?
Absolutely.
The House Always Wins, a Vegas ghost story. The new book started out decent, plugging along, but now with it's everything is cumulative. I've done so many different events and gotten different kinds of reviews and blogs and not by accident, by really hustling. But now it's been out 7 or 8 months. That's a long time and a short time, right? But
Mhm.
I feel the momentum. I got a royalty statement and check from my publisher, and it was better than I thought. That has
Awesome.
rarely happened to me. So it's like, all right, let's keep this train rolling.
That's awesome. Now, since you are with a publisher and you are a media and advertising sort of guru here that I think a lot of our listeners are going to be looking up to, can you give us a little insight into what it has been like for you? Because I know a lot of publishers will be with you through the launch period, but it's very rare for a publisher to hang on to heavily promoting your book unless it's a runaway bestseller after a certain period of time. Do you find that to be true for your experience or any
Yeah,
feedback?
you nailed it actually, and I'm fortunate that I've got a foot in both camps because I started out in the early 2000s on the cutting edge. It was cutting edge in those days of self-publishing. I got close a couple times with my first manuscript, but ultimately I learned about self-publishing. I decided to give it a try. It happened to work for me. I got real lucky on the first one, and I thought, oh, this is easy. But then the second one didn't do nearly as well, even though I still think it's a great book called Money Shot. But anyway, um, in this day and age, so self-publishing, you do everything on your own. So when I was finally able to hook up with a real publisher, whatever they were able to do, I was grateful for. But still, at least 90% falls on the author unless you are a name brand. So for the vast majority of us, it's up to us to make things happen. And therein lies the conundrum, because most writers, and this is not a criticism, because I may sound like a guy who is good with media, and it's only because I've done this so many times, but I'm shy. And all things considered, I'd rather be in my office writing. So that's most creative people. And I think that with authors especially, it's hard for them to put on their promotional hat. I've gone to a lot of events, and they got to fake it till they make it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to us to be the best ambassadors of our own work. Now, you're going to find other people to help carry that torch, but especially at the beginning, you got to get out there. Nothing happens until you get out there.
And the other advice I would have for authors on top of that is don't compare yourself to what other people are doing. You don't know what their budget is, you don't know what their experience is, you don't know who's guiding them. Do what you can do. And even if what you're doing is out of the box, you don't know if that is what's going to make you a breakaway success. So it's absolutely okay to challenge boundaries, do something that seems completely unique or just out of the ordinary, and don't compare what you're doing to what somebody else might be doing.
Now I feel like you hacked my hard drive, because I have a
Oh.
blog that addresses that. And you're so right. And that even goes back to the writing. I mean, if your favorite author is super successful, and there's people that I read that I just go, in my entire, I could live forever and not be as brilliant as Michael Chabon, for example.
Mm.
Just the writing is astonishingly good. But so if I'm going to compare myself to somebody like that, I'll never put another word on paper again. My goal in terms of comparisons is just to compare myself with how I was last week, last month, last year. I want to continually improve as a writer. And if I can look at current stuff and old stuff and go, I've learned a thing or two. I know my strengths. I know my weaknesses. I happen to be really good at dialogue. I know a lot of successful writers who are great, but their dialogue is clunky. It's very much like music. I think you're kind of born with it to a certain extent. I don't know why I'm good at it. Maybe because I lived at the movies when I was a kid, and maybe I absorbed stuff. So, but getting back to your point, you're exactly right. Don't copy anybody in terms of your style. Maybe at first, as you're learning, that's natural, but ultimately develop your own voice, your own style, your own tone, embrace it. And it can actually make marketing in some ways easier, in some ways harder. My new book is cross genre. It's a love story. It's a road trip. It's a ghost story. It's a mob story. It's a Vegas story, and it's makes it harder because the stores and the reviewers don't know where to slot you.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it's the story I wanted to tell. If I wanted to be very, very much within a genre, I get bored with that. Now, if I'm going to write something that I think is boring, why bother?
This is true. And I like that you said that you cross genres because some people feel like they have to fit within a genre, but I can guarantee you that if you write a good product, if you're relatable and people like you, they will find a way to fit you on the shelf or fit your event in or fit your manuscript within their catalog. And they'll find a way to categorize you that suits their needs,
You're
regardless of.
exactly right. Let them figure it out, right? They just
Yeah.
have to like it.
Exactly. Just get them to like it and let them do the hard
Right.
stuff.
Look at a guy like Murakami, who I was just introduced to maybe
Mm.
4 or 5 years ago, and now I'm voraciously reading all of his backlog
Ugh,
stuff,
the
right?
Wind Up Bird Chronicles blows my mind.
Unbelievable, right? It is mine, and that's the genre, right? I mean, where do you
Mhm.
slot him? It's mind-blowing stuff. That's how you hit the nail on the head.
Him, Murakami and Orhan Pamuk. I don't know if you've read any Pamuk, but my friends are
I'm not familiar.
his narration and his descriptions, like people are legitimately sick of me talking about him, and I just cannot quit. And it's been 2 years since I first read My Name is Red, and it impacted me so deeply that I read it. It's a almost 700-page novel. I read it 5 times in 1 year. Uh,
Wow.
I just and in the Happy Writing Facebook group, people are like, "We already know what you're gonna say, so don't
Those
bring him up."
I need a new writer to get obsessed with, so, please send me
Dan
a link.
dangerous territory.
Right.
Um, so I have one more question for you. I could talk to you all time for a long time. We're gonna have you back on.
I would
Um,
love to. This is so much fun.
yeah, I we try to keep it to half an hour, and we might have to start going longer.
Oh, I'm sorry, did we go over?
No, we're good. So, do you
Hey, that's
have
your job as the host, right? To cut me off?
no, it's the worst part. But that just means we can have people back on at another time. Do you have a favorite book or a favorite inspirational quote?
Well, I saw that in your email, and I actually wrote down 2. Can I give you 2?
Absolutely.
And it has to do with hard work and sacrifice, which is not
Perfect.
necessarily what people need to hear, but maybe they do. Uh, One is suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. And
Mm.
that's a guy that I looked up to since I was a kid. That's Muhammad Ali said that.
Uh,
And he lived it. And that's what happens. I mean, this is hard work. It's fun, it's gratifying, but it's ultimately grinded out. And so there is some suffering involved when you hit the wall or you write yourself into a corner. So I love that one. And then in terms of also staying with it and being open to possibilities, this is a line from one of my favorite songs by Jackson Brown. He says, "Don't think it can't happen just because it hasn't happened yet." And
mm,
in a future interview, if you have me back, I can tell you all kinds of stories about author friends who are really good, who plugged away for 10 years before breaking through, and now they're phenomenally successful. 10 years, 6 or 7 or 8 unpublished manuscripts, and they just kept going. How much do you admire that?
I love that because every time someone has a story like that, it reminds people that it might not be your first book. It might not be your second book. You never know when it's going to come. And even if it takes you 10 years to write a manuscript, you could release it tomorrow and realize that that's what you were meant to do and find your audience tomorrow. Time does not necessarily impact our industry as much as it does some others. So I think stories like that are extremely powerful.
You're exactly right. Good writing is timeless.
Mm. It really, I don't know, just thinking of people making it after 10 years or so, it just kind of gave me chills. So,
I just got
okay.
them too across 6,000 miles. It's amazing.
We're gonna to have you back on.
Well,
So,
can I give you a compliment? And this
sure.
is sincere. I don't say anything unless it's sincere, or at least sound sincere.
Oh,
Uh,
thanks.
I have done literally hundreds and hundreds of interviews over the last 20 years about my books and my writing. This is my favorite one ever.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh,
Because
that
we got
means
into the philosophy, we got into the nuts and bolts. It doesn't get, and you're super pleasant. It doesn't get any better than this.
oh, thank you so much. I'm really trying to do something different and showcase a different side of authors and inspire people who might be struggling and present writing realistically, but inspirational. And the people that have come to us, queried us for interviews, I don't know how we've got such an amazing group, but everyone is just phenomenal.
I know how you
So,
got an amazing group. You're putting out the right vibe, and you're well branded at Happy Writing.
well, good. I tried so hard.
I'm wearing
So.
my marketing hat now, and this is bound to succeed. I know it's a new venture. It's bound to succeed.
Well, this has been so fun, and I would definitely love to have you on a future episode. So
anytime. This was so much fun. I can't tell you.
I'm so excited. It makes me so happy. So thank you for such a lovely compliment. We want to thank you for joining us today for the Happy Writing Podcast. And as always, don't forget to head over to happywriting.co and take advantage of that $5 deal just for listening to our podcast. You can join the Author Lounge for $5 for your first 3 months using the code Happy Podcast. If you want to sponsor a future episode, you can also find that information under happywriting.co/podcast. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next author interview.